Mariella Smith is here.
Good morning. I'd like to call the regular board meeting of HART to order. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we're going to move first into recognitions, heroic actions by HART Operations Department. Ted Harris. Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Ted Harris. I'm the CEO at HART, and I'm here today to make a special presentation to 3 HART heroes. The employees are Operator Katrina Owens. Katrina, if you could join me, please. Transit Supervisor Hugh Matei, and Controller Jeff Skeldon. Okay, they're not there. Operator Katrina Owens was on an empty bus as she pulled into her final stop at Brixton Plaza one Monday evening, except for one passenger. Miss Owens had noticed the man riding all day long, but when she asked him where he was headed, the passenger had a difficult time communicating. The customer was a 35-year-old man, Tyrese Dillard, who was on the wrong bus to get home to his family in Fort Myers. But he did have the right bus operator behind the wheel. Dillard's family had reported him missing the previous week from Fort Myers area. They reported to law enforcement, and they were worried about Dillard, about his safety and well-being, because he was a special needs person. Operator Owens has a background as a nursing assistant and used her skills and experience working with dementia patients to identify Dillard's need for help. Owens called the HART Transit Supervisor Hugh Matei to meet her and her passenger. Meantime, Senior Community Operations Controller Jeff Skelton contacted Tampa Bay Police Department to explain the situation, asking for their assistance as well. Skelton's persistence and calm manner resulted in 2 officers responding, who eventually located Dillard's family and reunited them. This is the second time Owens has reunited a lost loved one with his family. HART recently recognized her in September with an on-the-spot award for her compassionate actions. Owens, in the previous incident, picked up an elderly patron at Rolette Park bus stop and detected that he may be suffering from dementia. She drove him to the Marion Transit Center and waited with the patron during her only break, consoling him until law enforcement could locate his family. 2 local news outlets recognized Operator Owens for her keen awareness, compassion, and selflessness in attending both patrons who were in need. Operations plans to recognize her as well with her second on-the-spot award. Transit operators are an integral part of the Tampa community. Operators are embedded on routes and witness to community activities and customers who travel every day. This event shows the importance of teamwork both with inside HART, between operators and field support staff, Tampa Police, and how HART positively affects our community. Thank you. Thank you to all the HART employees. Thank you for being there in a time of need. And Katrina, I'd like to present you with a certificate of appreciation and a small token.
Good morning.
So thank you. Would you like to say any words?
Yes. I'm very grateful for Ms. Williams and everyone. I just love my job, and I'm just glad that God put me at the right place at the right time. For both of them. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
This is Hugh Matea. I would also like to congratulate him He was the supervisor that responded on the street and helped coordinate the entire efforts with Tampa Police. So Hugh, thank you very much.
Okay, employee recognitions.
Good morning, Ruthie Reyes Burkhardt, Deputy Chief of Transportation. Today, we're recognizing some of our lead operators and Teamster of the Quarter, and I'll start with bus operator Kenneth McDonald. He was awarded for Operator of the Month in October of 2019. Operator McDonald enjoys meeting different people on his routes and helping them get to their destinations safely. He says that they keep him going, make him laugh, and smile all the time. Hired as an operator in March of 2015 after serving in the U.S. Navy, Ken has gone through the training and is one of our elite certified operator instructors. Thank you. Bus operator Desmond Coulson, not here today, but we recognize him for Operator of the Month for November of 2019. Desmond was hired in November of 1998. He enjoys helping his patrons find their way and make their connections. He's a member of the 1 Million Mile Group, another elite group of operators who amass over 1 million miles driven without a chargeable accident. He's also been nominated as Operator of the Month 3 times. He has 2 stepchildren, enjoys playing dominoes, watching football, and gardening, and I'm sure he had a ball last night. Operator of the Month for December of 2019, Joseph Williams began his career at HART in July of 2016. He really likes meeting and assisting people to get to where they need to go. Joseph enjoys coaching young athletes and was even drafted by the San Diego Chargers after playing football in both high school and college. He also plays basketball and golf. So thank you to Operator Williams. And lastly, we have Teamster of the Quarter for the fourth quarter of 2019, Operations Controller Michael Zamoretti. Michael became a paratransit van operator at HART in January of 2013 and has been an operations controller with HART since 2015. A Tampa native, he enjoys giving back to his community and by assisting in the smooth delivery of transit service. Mike has gone above and beyond in his role as a controller and working with management to streamline processes and improve operations. He also voluntarily participates in the process of becoming a certified TSSP, Transit Safety and Security Program, and the Public Transportation Safety Certification Training Program, all on his own time. Mike enjoys traveling to new places and hockey. Go Bolts. And thank you to Mike Zamoretti.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good morning. Scott Drainville, Deputy Chief of Maintenance and Facilities. I'd like to recognize the following maintenance employees. For Maintenance Employee of the Month for October of 2019, Antonio Leslie. Antonio is a maintenance vehicle attendant and has been with HART since March of 2016. Antonio has the difficult task of keeping HART's vehicles clean and presentable. He consistently performs at 110%, which encourages all around him to do the same. Antonio has a great communication with his supervisors and addresses any and all issues that is safety or mechanical in nature. Antonio understands the mission and steps up without hesitation. Antonio couldn't be with us today. The Maintenance Employee of the Month for November of 2019, Kirk Bacabello. Kirk is a master paint and body technician and has been with HART since November of 2018. Before coming to HART, Kirk ran his own body shop for more than 20 years. He was instrumental in designing a repair for the van flooring issues. He also played a key role in prepping and preparing the buses each night for the driver safety shield installations and setting them up for the vendor for the following morning. Kirk's knowledge and experience has had tremendous impact on the productivity of the body shop. Thank you, Kirk. For Maintenance Employee of the Month for December of 2019, Daryl Ochoa. Daryl is a route maintenance attendant and has been with HART since April of 2013. Daryl is one of the 7 route maintenance attendants that are responsible for inspecting and maintaining HART's 34 bus routes and more than 2,400 bus stops. He also played a major role in inspecting and updating the hurricane evacuation signage. Daryl is always looking for ways to make his job more efficient, and when a difficult situation arises, Daryl finds the solution. Thank you, Daryl. And for non-bargaining employee of the quarter, Christine Machowski. Is that right? Christine is our maintenance fleet planner and started her journey with HART in March of 2004. Christine is the ultimate team player. She has spearheaded a reorganization of maintenance's budget and financial records that will help maintenance remain streamlined. Her attention to detail has identified and corrected many inefficiencies. Besides working with maintenance budgets and finances, Christine does NTT reporting, fuel reporting, tire reporting, reviews contracts, leads the Vehicle Control Officer Program, reviews SOPs, generates board action items, updates paperwork for grants, and helps provide metrics for quarterly performance. Christina also pushed the maintenance team to improve process and create stopgaps for providing training within the maintenance department to cover vital duties when key members are out of office, building a better realization of many members' roles and responsibilities. Christine does these things and more with a positive can-do attitude that is infectious to the group. She takes on additional roles at every opportunity and is eager to learn and contribute more. Thank you, Christine. Can I have the group come up and take a photo?
That's everyone. Yeah.
If we could have the board members also stand so we can be part of this photo.
Okay, how are we gonna do this? Some of you gotta come around here. Someone gotta come around here. You come around this way.
Yeah.
Squeeze in between here.
They're all tall.
Don't worry about it. Don't need to be seen.
Yeah. I'm good.
Let me say on behalf of the board, we thank you for all that you do. I know sometimes you don't get those attaboys, but let me say to you that we appreciate each and every one of you very much for your job that you do. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're now moving to regular approval of the minutes from our regular board meeting from January 6, 2020. That's a motion. Second? Is there a second? Second. There's a motion. Second to approve those minutes. Any discussion? Any further discussion? All those in favor, let me know by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, likewise. Motion is adopted. Do we have any public input on agenda items?
On agenda, Michael Marino and Linda Ramos. Oops. Michael Marino and Linda Ramos.
Okay. We have two people that would like to speak on agenda items. We have 3 minutes. First person is Michael Marino.
Good morning, board members. My name is Michael Marino. I'm the Director of Transportation and Planning for the West Shore Alliance. We provided a letter to the clerk of the board last week. If you haven't seen it, I'm sure we'll be seeing it at some point. But regarding the agenda item 7B and improvements to the bus operations and bus network in 2020, 2022, and the future operations plan, we have asked, or we have provided 3 suggestions for you, namely adding additional two-way service on West Shore Boulevard from Kennedy to Spruce, adding, restoring service on Cypress from downtown to West Shore, which obviously would pick up Midtown, but also would pick up some of the social services that are in the West Shore district. And then the last point, having additional express service and local service coming from the Northwest, especially Northwest Transfer Center. There's a lot of employees who live in West Shore. There's more affordable or more accessible housing in that area, but the transit isn't there to match. So the timing is right for this because when the West Shore interchange is rebuilt, there's a potential to have transit funding via maintenance of traffic program. So there's an opportunity there to use some FDOT funding to provide that additional transit service. And we have worked with you in the past on other projects. We work with the city and county on other projects as well. So we look forward to working with you to get that service restored in West Shore. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Linda Redmond. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Linda Raymond, President and CEO of the Tampa Downtown Partnership, and I'm here today about item 7A. As you know, and HART graciously took over the financial obligations of the Downtowners Shuttle back in August of last year, and that contract was to run through March 31st of this year. The partnership's initiative was always to start that program on a 3-year program, fund it with our partners, and then hand it off to an organization who could manage that program, and HART did that for us. What we'd like to ask today, because we understand that there may be some funding questions regarding going past the March 31st date, and we don't want HART to be able to go into the reserves. We don't feel like that's an option that we would want to ask you to do. So what we are asking today is that item 7A be scratched from the agenda, and that we will work, the partnership will work with our partners going forward after that March 31st date to continue the downtown shuttle. And we really appreciate your support up to this point and the partnership that you've given us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We're now moving to the General Counsel's report, and the report is the whistleblower's investigation report. We're going to set some ground rules. The representative from Carlton Fields will make their presentation. There will be no questions asked while the presentation is being given. The question will be asked after the complete presentation is given by Carlton Fields. At the end of those questions, then Mr. Limmer will come forth and make any remarks he needs to make. No questions will be asked during his presentation, and after he finishes his presentation, if any questions will be asked, we'll ask questions at that point, and then the board can have a discussion as that's what we're going to do regarding the investigation report and the comments by Mr. Limmer. Any questions on the ground rules? Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Smith.
Yes, I'd like to speak, please.
Commissioner
Hello?
Smith? Commissioner
Hello?
Smith, do you recognize Commissioner Smith?
Yes,
Yes.
thank you. We received this report very late on Sunday, yesterday, roughly 16 hours ago. It's a very lengthy report. It comes with a lot of supporting documentation. And I feel strongly that in order for us to have an informed and productive discussion about such a serious matter, we all need more time to review this material carefully. I feel that Mr. Limmer is entitled to sufficient time for review and preparation before stepping up to answer any questions we might have, and staff may need to prepare to answer questions. We all may need to review additional material. I would like to make a motion to receive the report in writing, but to defer all discussion and deliberation and presentation to a special meeting to be held later at some time the board would agree, but no sooner than Friday, February 7th, and no later than the following Friday, February 14th. And that's my motion.
We have a motion by Commissioner Smith, second by Mr.
And I would second that. This is Kathleen Shanahan. I'm on the phone. I would second that.
We have a motion by Commissioner Smith, second by Mr. Harden, to postpone discussion on this investigation. To what date was that, Commissioner Smith? Commissioner
Well, I'm suggesting, yes, can you hear me? I'm suggesting no sooner than this Friday, February 7th, no later than the following Friday, February 14th, but my motion includes receiving nothing orally, so that there is nothing presented except for just to receive the report in writing.
Well, I hope that you, in your motion, you would give us a specific date. You gave us a week. Give us a specific date. I think that's what we need to have on your motion, if you don't mind doing that.
Yes. Well, I think we're going to, with all these elected officials in our scheduled meetings, we're going to need to let staff work something out. But so I was suggesting something between Friday's good with me, the 7th. But if it's not good with everybody, I was saying somewhere between that Friday and the following Friday.
Standing up fix the date. Okay. We have a motion by Commissioner Smith, second by Mr. Harden. Is there any further discussion on the motion?
Chair? My
No,
name
sir.
is Ryan Barrick. I'm counsel for Mr. Limmer. May I be heard on this motion?
Sir, no, sir. No, sir. Is there any discussion on the motion from the board? Any discussion?
Chairman, this is Kathleen Shanahan.
Yes, ma'am.
I have to say that I think Commissioner Smith raises some very good points about the lateness, which was we got the report. There's a lot of data to consume, and to give the parties involved fair time to present with thoughtful anticipation of whatever questions they're going to get and an answer. I don't think having something today is really respectful of both the process as well as the participants.
Okay. Any further discussion? Commissioner Overman, you recognize.
Let's see. Oh, there it is. I actually also am a little concerned that we have adequate time to review all of the data. I was able to review the summary, but not all the rest of the information. But I'd also concur that having a meeting possibly on the 14th, which is a Friday, and gives us 2 weeks to be best prepared, we would have a more robust conversation rather than to continue to disrupt our regular board agendas with items that are critically important and need full discussion. I would anticipate that this meeting would have been exceedingly long given the circumstances, even though we might not have comments or questions. But I do think it's appropriate to have it as a special meeting.
So you make an amendment that we have it on the 14th? Because I didn't get a date from Commissioner Smith.
I would recommend, yes, an amendment that the meeting be scheduled for 9 a.m. on February 14th.
Is there a second for the amendment?
Second.
There's a second by Mr. Mechanic for an amendment to have the meeting on the 14th. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Knight, you recognize.
Yeah, good morning. Also, could you consider maybe a later meeting, that special call meeting, if okay with everybody else? The time, yeah, later on in the day.
Mr. Knight wants to know if we can do it later on in the day instead of at 9 a.m. I think pushing it later on the day on a Friday kind of gets kind of difficult.
I'm
for some
saying,
folks.
I thought it was going to be before Friday.
No, he said the 14th, which is a Friday.
On the 14th.
The 14th on the Friday.
Right, it's a Friday.
Before. Okay.
Before we vote on that, Mr. Smith, is there anything you want to comment on this, the amendment and the motion?
Well, certainly, the board can do that. I don't know whether you want to hear anything from the report and about the report
The motion was
today.
The original motion was not to hear anything today.
Okay, well, the board is certainly free to do that. We need to set a special meeting if that's what you're doing.
Okay, all right. All right. Any other comments? Commissioner Kemp, you recognize.
I agree that we should do this with more deliberation and more time. We didn't get this report at all till late last night or late yesterday, and it was quite voluminous.
When you're speaking, push your green, the button to say green light will
I
come on.
do have it pushed, and it's on my mic, but apparently not
Okay.
working. And so I would agree, I'm not, the date, I'm just wondering, because it sounds like there's some issues here, and I'm just wondering about, after saying that we should set a special meeting, there we go, that we could consider a date since, with this group in here to see when they could make that meeting.
Excuse me?
I'd like to take a vote first that we set a special meeting.
Well, she's
and-
already set the date, Commissioner Kemp.
February
amendment.
14th at 9 a.m.
It doesn't work for a lot of folks. I think what Commissioner Kemp is asking is let's look at the dates at a later time, set the meeting first, agree to move this to a time period in between the 10th and the 14th, and then let's work that date out.
I agree.
Okay. We're making this so difficult on a simple motion. The amendment is to have it on the 14th. And it appears there's some problems with the amendment. So are you willing to carry forth the amendment or you want to withdraw it?
I'm willing to withdraw it. I did look at the calendar, and for those of us on a BOCC calendar, the 14th looks like our only day that we're not fully
Exactly.
engaged. So unless there are other board members that find the 14th impossible to attend either in physical form or by phone, it appeared when I glanced at the calendar, based on my schedule and several of us here at the table, the 14th looked like the most flexible day beyond the 7th.
For Board of County Commissioners meeting members this week and all of next week is tight, except for the 14th.
Right.
Okay, the motion, your amendment's withdrawn?
I'll withdraw the amendment, but I'm not sure that it's going to achieve us getting a meeting
know it.
scheduled.
Amendment's withdrawn. Mr. Smith?
The only question I have, not having the policies before me, and this board never having set a special meeting while I've been here, is whether you need to have a date certain when the board sets it. I do know the chairman has the ability to call a special meeting on an emergency basis. Whether we have an emergency basis or not, I'm not sure. So I'm not certain that you have the authority to set a meeting at an undated time. It might be better to set it for the 14th, and if you have to rearrange it, we can look at the process to rearrange it.
Just added some more mud to this.
May I,
Where's Commissioner Smith?
excuse me,
Commissioner
may I
Smith,
speak?
Commissioner
It's Maria
Smith,
Ellisman.
Commissioner Smith, hold on just a second, please.
Yes,
Hold on, Commissioner.
All right.
Ms. Williams, you recognize.
Thank you. I think based on your directions, thank you, based on your directions and guidelines for the questions, I thought we weren't going to ask any questions. We were going to receive information, and it would give us an opportunity to look at the data as well as hear the information, and then we could make a decision at that point going forward. My recommendation is that my schedule is tight, and if we have to go with the 14th, I will not be able to make it, nor anytime that week I'll be traveling. So I want to make sure I hear what I can hear while it is available, understanding that there are no questions.
Okay. The amendment has been withdrawn. We're now on the motion to not hear anything today. And Commissioner Smith, you recognize. Commissioner Smith.
my motion was, yes, sir. My motion was to set a meeting between February 7th, this Friday, and the following Friday. But I would like to withdraw and restate the motion to simply set another meeting, and then we can discuss what date might work for everybody. Unless the 7th, this Friday, works for everybody.
So are you withdrawing your original motion?
Yeah, and I'll just make it not, to defer discussion to a special meeting with the understanding we will then determine a date that works for everybody.
Okay, Commissioner Smith withdrawn the original motion. Now she makes another motion to have a special meeting with no date set. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Harden. Is there any discussion? Any discussion? See no discussion. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposers, likewise.
Aye.
Hold up, Commissioner Smith. Sound like you voted against your own motion.
No, she did. She said aye.
All those in favor, let it be known by saying
No,
aye.
no, I said
She said aye.
aye.
Wipe the slate clean. Wipe the slate clean. We're going to vote again, okay? All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
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 All those opposed?
No.
Motion carries. Now, we're going to set a date now and let staff talk to us about getting a date and get back with us. What's your pleasure?
7th is fine.
What's your pleasure? Mr. Harden, you recognize.
I'm willing to be flexible, but it seems like the elected folks here, it might be good to discuss this and get it resolved now and date set. So.
Okay, what's your pleasure? Mr. Knight, you recognize.
Okay, like I said, I'm willing to try to work it out, but we have one more co-chair. What would be a good date?
The 7th nor the following week aren't available for me. I'm traveling. The only damn things available is that Monday.
And I can tell you, for the county commissioners, this week and next week are bad, except for the 14th. If that's the case, we're now getting into the week of the 17th, which,
It's a holiday.
pardon?
It's a holiday week.
What holiday?
President's Day.
Really?
Yeah, I actually do pay attention to those government holidays.
Okay. So what's your pleasure, folks? Commissioner Kemp, you recognize.
Thank you. I have a schedule where I could, move what I have. We have no, or for me, no meetings on Friday, the 7th, and also on Monday, the 10th. I don't know about barriers for other commissioners, or perhaps they could rearrange what they have.
I can't. Commissioner Kemp, Commissioner Overman, you recognize.
7th actually works fine for me. I was curious about your inability to attend via phone if possible on the 7th, but I do have an Affordable Housing Advisory Board meeting on the 10th in the morning. I could rearrange other things, but I have a court hearing at 3 p.m. on Monday afternoon that I will not miss, so that I cannot attend telephonically. So the 10th is very difficult. The 7th and the 14th, both of those are flexible enough that I could make either one of those 2 dates work.
Anyone
The
else?
7th and the 14th work for me as well.
Whoa.
Anyone else?
It's good for me.
7th and 14th work for Mayor Kapster.
They both work for
7th.
Madam Harden.
The 7th is better for me. Commissioner Smith, the 7th is better for me.
Ms. Williams?
I'll call in, but if that's an option on the 7th.
Commissioner Kemp, you recognize.
The 7th is also better for me. I've had a prearranged, we have a retreat with Mosey on the 14th.
Okay, will someone make a motion then?
I'll make a motion, we hold the special meeting on February 7th.
Second.
At
what
9
time?
a.m.
There's a motion by Mr. Mechanic, second by Councilman Chisler to hold the meeting on this coming Friday, February the 7th at 9 a.m. Is there any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, let me know by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, likewise.
Aye.
Motion is adopted. Sorry, guys. See you Friday. Yeah. Okay, we're now moving to the election of HART officers and vote on HART board appointments and other matters and HART committees. Turn the meeting over to Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith, when you're done, I'd like to be recognized.
Good morning. Again, we are here to elect officers pursuant to the policies established by the board. I think you remember from the last time when this was postponed, the way this procedure works, there are certain offices that are open for a nomination from the floor. A vote is taken by the board to determine those who can serve, and there are some limitations with respect to who can serve. I want to make sure I refresh your recollection in that regard. It says, there shall be elected members of the board, a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary. Ordinarily, the first January meeting's been postponed to now. Through an open process with nominations accepted from the floor, and general counsel will run the nomination process. HART board positions are to be filled by at least one county elected representative, with the exception of the requirement that at least one county elected representative, any board member, may serve as an officer. So it is not a requirement that the county elected serve as chair. It is a requirement that a county elected serves in one of the 3 board positions. As you know, each officer is a period of 1 year. And there's limitations on your ability to serve consecutive terms. That policy says a board member may serve the board in consecutive terms as an officer in various capacities. However, no board member may serve in the same capacity for more than 3 consecutive terms as an officer. And our chair is currently serving his 3rd consecutive term. It is ineligible to serve as chair. It doesn't make him ineligible to serve as vice chair, but it makes him ineligible to serve as chair. There are provisions for resignation we need not address today because that's not an issue that's before us. So unless there's further discussion, I will open up yes, sir.
Go ahead.
I will open up the chair for nominations I'll put up the floor for nominations for the chair. Mr. Miller.
Mr. Smith, I'd like to nominate Ms. Melanie Williams for chair.
Okay.
I'll second that.
And just to clarify the process, actually with nominations, we don't need a second. We just need a series of nominations. And once the nominations are closed, we vote on those nominations. Currently, we have Ms. Melanie Williams as a nominee for chair. Any other nominations? Ms. Kim.
I'd like to nominate Commissioner Smith for chair.
Are there any further nominations? Mr. Harden.
I understand the discussion with regards to our current chairman, Commissioner Miller, but my question is there a possibility for us to extend his term, his third term?
Okay.
We can't hear Mr. Harden on those.
Okay, what Mr. Harden said was he understands the term limitations for the current chair, and his inquiry is whether there is an ability to change that provision or otherwise modify the ability of Mr. Miller to serve for some additional period of time as chair, if I'm understanding your question correctly.
Yes, sir, that's my question. I feel like where we are right now, that we have steady leadership, and I would like to see that continue.
Okay, the two policies implicated by that question, and I want to read them again to make sure we're clear on it, because I am thinking this through as we are discussing this issue. And I'm not, as we already know, infallible in that regard. So it says, a board member may serve the board in consecutive terms as an officer in various capacities. However, no board member shall serve in the same capacity for more than 3 consecutive terms. It seems to me, since this is a body which has plenary power, that opens up the possibility for some potential extension, but it could not be another term for Mr. Miller. Now, that's, not necessarily ineluctable in terms of the interpretation of the text, meaning it's open to other interpretations, but that is a possibility. So I believe you indicated your primary concern is the, quote, steadying hand of an experienced chairman through the process that we're currently experiencing.
Yes, correct. So I make a motion that we extend Commissioner Miller's current term as chairman of the HART Board through June.
I would second that.
We are not in the nomination process. I feel this should go back to the chair, which I know puts you in a very awkward position. But it's not technically, it's a policy issue. And I will also indicate, just to make sure I'm clear, normally what this board does when it changes its policy is it directs general counsel to change the policy and come back with a new policy. However, this could be interpreted as simply a waiver of an existing policy, not a change in policy. I think the board has the plenary power to do that. It's anomalous. I've never seen it before, but that doesn't make it unlawful. It just makes it unique. So I hope that answers the questions you may have.
I can't chair it because it's involving me at this particular point in time, so I'd have to turn it over to either you or...
I believe Ms. Williams would be the appropriate chair, but I do not believe I've heard a second to the motion. Have I? Oh, yeah, did someone on the phone, Ms. Shanahan. So there is a motion and a second. I'll turn it over to Ms. Williams.
I'd like to ask do you have questions, Commissioner Overman?
I can appreciate Mr. Harden's motion. We made the exception to move these nominations because of what's going on currently within HART's organization. I think I hear you saying, Mr. Harden, is that given that this situation has not yet been resolved, we made the waiver of elections for January. Is it my understanding or your intention to extend that waiver that we granted in January to June with your motion, sir?
I guess we're looking to counsel here. I think the form that my motion took was one of extending the term for us to, we have a motion and a second to extend the term of Commissioner Miller as chairman of HART until the end of June. Yes, correct. So his third term would be extended till the end of June.
Madam Chairman, I think the better approach would be one to waive the policy for the period through June rather than extend the term, but the same consequence.
So shall I restate the motion then? So I move that we waive the board policy that limits the current chairman to 3 consecutive terms and therefore allowing him to serve in his current term until the end of June.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions on the motion? All of those that say aye.
Aye.
Any opposing?
Aye.
Nay.
The motion has passed. We'll adopt it. You will continue in your role until June.
Okay. I thank you for the vote of confidence, and we will continue with the work that we have to have done. Thank you again for your vote of confidence. I appreciate it. Okay, we're moving to the presentations, agency safety update.
Good morning. My name is Colin Malloy. I'm the Director of Safety and Security for HART. I thank you for the opportunity to speak in front of this board once again. My presentation today is an agency safety update. I will also be referencing some security items as well. This presentation is contains items from the briefing that was provided to the Operations and Safety Committee previously. So in terms of the presentation, the topics that I wanted to share with the board will frame around the 2019 success plan.
Hold on.
Yes, sir.
We need to hold off on your presentation. We did not finish some election procedures.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith.
Yes, essentially you have waived the application of the limitation to the chair, but we did not do anything with respect to the other officers or with respect to the committees. So unless you want to essentially defer the election process to June, we're going to have to handle the other positions now. Or you can make the same waiver to maintain the current slate through June, which is essentially the same.
I'll move that we waive the policy in order to continue the other officers, the other two officers until June.
And I would like to acknowledge there's some concern about committees. Obviously, the chairman could do what's necessary to make sure we're going to have quorums at committees. So I understand there's a motion on the floor to, I'm sorry.
No, you go.
Okay, the motion on the floor to waive the term for the entire slate of candidates. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Yes, sir.
I'd like to amend the motion to both to extend the two existing officers, as you stated, and to ask to empower the chairman to fill any committee, other committee positions necessary to ensure that the committees have a quorum during his extended tenure.
Is that an amendment to the motion that's on the floor?
I think it is.
And you made the motion, Mr.
Yeah.
Mechanic, I believe. Do you accept that friendly
Yeah, I
amendment?
mean, that was inherent. I mean, the
Understood.
chairman already has
Okay.
the
That power,
powers
yes.
of the chairman. So
Okay.
there's no.
Then I withdraw that.
Okay. Any further discussion? The motion on the floor is the motion to waive the slate through June, so the current slate of officers remain in effect, current committee people remain in effect, although the chair has the ability to adjust committees. Hearing no further discussion, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
There's 3 votes no, so it carries.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Smith. Mr. Malloy. Sorry about that, sir.
Wait, before you go on, Mr. Chair.
Hold on.
I'm understanding the motion to include all of the external board appointments as well for the time being. I believe that's what Mr. Mechanic's motion included, and unless I'm understanding that incorrectly, it would include the Historic Streetcar Metropolitan Planning Organization and the Transportation Disadvantage Coordinating Board slots. That's okay. That's what we voted on. Thank you.
Mr. Malloy.
Thank you. So this presentation is an agency safety update that also brings up some of the security updates as well. Very similar to the briefing that was provided to the Operations and Safety Committee earlier in January. In terms of framing this presentation, I talk about the 2019 success plan, how that relates to the National Transit Database, specifically talking about HART safety events, and then continuing with some analysis into our accidents as well as our security incidents such as physical and verbal altercations. I kind of conclude with some of the actions that we have taken and will be taking continually, as well as an updated reporting schedule, and then any questions that the board may have. So to lay the foundation for this presentation, this really began as part of the success plan that HART had put together in the previous year. That was a critical document for this organization that put together the strategy of how we would act as an organization moving forward. There were some critical components within that success plan, such as service productivity, our fund balance, as well as our customer experience. And one of the core items was safety. We knew that going into that year, to truly have a successful year, we had to both enhance safety within our organization, as well as reduce the number of safety events that we see within our operating environment. That leads into the question of what exactly is a safety event. So I just wanted to give a really quick overview of when we say safety event, what that means. In terms of the safety event, we utilize the National Transit Database as the definition or criteria for what a safety event is. Just as a refresher, the National Transit Database really is the gold standard when it comes to transit-related information. Agencies throughout the country are required to report to NTD from anything from grants to ridership to funding that they receive. And one of the items is actually safety and security. So each month we are currently reporting to FTA the number of what they call safety and security events. And that's the definition that we've used in terms of the metric that was put in our success plan, because it really is a gold standard and it's a national baseline in terms of the definitions. And what those really mean, those definitions, is NTD is looking at significant events. So you're looking at property damage. You're looking at events where an individual may experience an injury or they've been transported for medical care, as well as security events that, for example, could lead to the evacuation of a bus for any type of security-related item. So with that definition in place, what we do is we take that NTD safety event and we cross-reference it by the number of passenger revenue miles that we transport throughout the year. And what I'm excited to say is that last year we actually saw a 20% decrease compared to 2018. And I also wanted to reference what the actual targets were and what the actuals that we experienced. So our target was 0.55 per 100,000 revenue miles. We actually beat that by having 0.45. So you can see kind of over the year, kind of how we fluctuated, but talking about specifically what these NTD safety events were, a lot of them were POV or personally owned vehicles colliding with HART buses. So if this board was ever asked, what are the type of significant accidents that our organization sees, the majority of them in terms of NTD are going to be third-party vehicles hitting HART buses. And when it comes to injuries, the majority of the injuries that we see really become slip, trips, and falls, and those related from those third-party vehicles. If we look at what the casual factors are in some of those type of events, we really find that they are hard braking events, our buses being rear-ended or sideswiped, as well as individuals falling while the bus is in motion. So in terms of the significant events, those are the things that we see throughout our system. That being said, though, our organization also, in totality, we experience a number of events that go beyond the scale of this NTD. And that's what I wanted to give you guys a little bit of analysis of in terms of accidents, what we actually see throughout our system. The vast majority of the type of accidents that our agency goes through are we call fixed object collisions or mere contacts. These are relatively low dollar value, low injury, low direct cost to the organization, but they do have a significant indirect cost. So for example, we have a mirror clip that takes out the side of one of the mirrors on the bus. That may not have a substantial financial repercussion to the organization, but it pulls that bus out of service. And at the end of the day, our core reason is we take people to places that enhance their lives. So anytime we have to pull a bus out of service, it really has that indirect cost. I'll give you an example of our CNG buses. due to the safety checks that we have to do with CNG, a bus that has some sort of those collisions, we do have to pull it completely out of revenue service and give it a full inspection, and that takes manpower time as well. Moving on from the fixed object collisions, we really find that those third-party vehicles in Tampa and Hillsborough are rear-ending our buses as well as the side swipes. So third-party vehicles hitting our buses represent 28% of all of our total accidents. 10% of those are actually specific to rear ends. So if you were looking at, in totality, what our accidents are, you have those fixed objects, and then close to 40% are third-party vehicles hitting our bus. It is followed then by some instance where maybe a HART vehicle wasn't completely, what we call preventable on those. So we do have roughly 10% of our accidents, a HART vehicle actually initiated the contact. 6% may result in a bus that has rear-ended a third-party vehicle, and then 5% are what we kind of call miscellaneous. In terms of the root cause that we find in some of the HART-related collisions, the majority of them, which would be preventable, normally are from the bus not being positioned properly or an operator possibly being distracted, and we do refresher training with all those operators on those type of events. So the first slide was talking about 2019. I also wanted to give you more of a recent breakdown of what we've been seeing in some of the trends. So if we were to look just through October through December, one of the key things that we've seen an increase on is those fixed object collisions. And later on in this presentation, in the action items, I talk about some of the steps that we're taking to mitigate those in the future, but that is one of the trends we're seeing in the last 3 months, is that these fixed object collisions and those mirror contacts are increasing quite a bit. They are low dollar value, but as again, they do affect our revenue service, so it's something that we're very cognizant of. In the last 3 months, 25% of our accidents have been related to third-party vehicles, either side swiping or side impacting HART buses, and again, roughly 10% of them are buses being rear-ended at a stop. I also wanted to share with you some of the security incidents that we've had and giving you kind of a breakdown of the type of verbal and physical altercations that we see throughout our system. Again, when I talked about NTD, one of the things that I failed to mention was one of the things that we report is that HART actually travels 13 million miles every year. We have 13 million trips that we provide. So that's 13 million people throughout both the Tampa Bay region, Hillsborough, and Tampa that we are providing trips to. So the vast, vast majority of our trips are safe and secure. But we do have some of these physical and verbal altercations, and I want to make sure I share with the board what those are. In the past year, we had roughly 16 out of 13 million trips that did have a physical or battery type of event. Of those 16, roughly 44% represented some sort of physical contact. So that could be someone placing their hands on our bus operator, pushing our operator, or in some way making contact with them. The 26% of them are objects being thrown. So in terms of physical things our operators go through is we've had cases of people throwing a water bottle or throwing some sort of object at our bus operator. Now again, in totality, we've only had 16, but we do take all of these very, very serious, and I wanted to share with you what some of our bus operators go through. Spitting is another concern that we have. So it is not unheard of for our operators for something from a fare dispute that escalates into an operator being spit on. So we do see those, and we had the two very, very severe incidents in May and in November, that did involve a knife. So, those were 2 incidents out of 13 million trips, but the severity of them has caused some major analysis on our part, and I talk about the action items that we have done and what we are doing in the future. Now, verbal altercations. So I broke these up into both what we call kind of offensive language and threatening language. So in 2019, roughly 75% of the verbal assaults that our operators were going through were kind of offensive language. So someone would curse at an operator. An example would be a patron comes onto our bus, maybe playing music really loud. The operator asks, would you please turn down that music? The response could be some sort of cursing language at our bus operator. Roughly 25% of those interactions do escalate into kind of a verbal assault. And in my next slide, I talk about the next couple months, but that's the trend that I want to share with the board that we're very concerned with, is that recently, in the past, we have seen this shift from offensive language to to these verbal assaults that are threatening our bus operators. So breaking down through October through December, the physical altercations, we had an operator that was hit in the head, breaking up a fight between teenage patrons. A patron threw water at a bus operator while exiting the bus. We had an operator that was attacked on November 19th. Then we had a patron that threw hot chocolate at the bus shields and also hit part of the operator. Again, I'm going to show the action items on the next couple slides of what we're doing, what we have done and will continue to do. But I want to also bring to this board's attention is we're seeing, in terms of this threatening language to our operators, a very large increase. So roughly 40% of our language now is severe threatening to our bus operators, where it's not unheard of for an operators in the past 3 months to hear that someone's going to cut their throat, that someone is going to stab them, that someone's going to kill them. They're going to continue on activities that they've heard from the May incident. So that is what has caused major concern. We've talked with our operators. We've talked with our staff here. We've worked on some legislation of how we help kind of have a holistic program. But that is one of the things I want to share is the change we're seeing is that this threatening language of killing some of our operators, we are seeing that throughout our system, and we've been working diligently of how we affect that. So here are the things that we have done I wanted to share with the board is this organization is not sitting still when it comes to doing actionable deliverables from what we've seen. We have really tried to be a leader in this sphere. We'll continue to do it. This board has been extremely supportive, as well as Ms. Carolyn House-Stewart and Mr. Limmer, in terms of giving us the resources to make that happen. So I wanted to actually share with you what we have done and what we're going to continue to do. In terms of, we have quarterly safety trainings that we put in where we're touching base with each of our bus operators. We put in a Certified Operator Instructor Academy. One of those gentlemen was recognized here as one of our employees. The belief is that we need to give skill sets to the people that are training our employees as well. We've had Safety Day of Actions in terms of promoting and recognizing, giving awareness to some of the great team members that we have within an organization. We've had a SAFE campaign, continuing that education component and that safety promotion. We've updated our security surveillance system on both our buses as well as our facilities. And we were one of the first agencies, if not the first in the state of Florida, to put security awareness monitors in our buses. We're very proud of that as a way to deter some of these actions from taking place. We went from unarmed security guards to armed security guards, and we increased their coverage to areas such as the Metro Rapid, to increase coverage at our 21st location, as well as Net Park. We've also had specific customized training by the Sheriff's Office. Sheriff Cronster actually did our first training session on a specifically designed curriculum that focused on de-escalation as well as situational awareness. We conducted a Ride with Respect campaign, letting this community know what great employees we have, letting them know that these individuals transporting you are members of the PTA, they're members of your church, they're coaching the softball team or helping with the dance recitals. They're integral parts. Our bus operators are integral parts of this community. I have I'm glad to be part of an organization of our bus operator earlier who helped the gentleman who had the special needs getting back to their family. We are this community. We transport this community, and it's something the people that provide this service are really great public servants. We've enhanced the signage. Along with the shields, we've enhanced the signage in terms of some of the consequences for assaulting a bus operator. Yes. We've installed the safety shields. This organization made a commitment from this board in terms of funding and putting in safety shields throughout our entire system in record time. I mentioned that at the committee, and I want the full board to hear it. Our maintenance employees, our operations staff, our ATU union, they really went above and beyond in terms of getting a specially designed shield, getting it to the fabricators, and installing it in record time. I know of no other agency that moved as fast as HART did in putting those in, and the only way we did that is because we have a great unit that worked with us, we have a great maintenance staff, operations, safety, and procurement that worked hand in hand to make that occur. We've also worked with external stakeholders such as Tampa PD. We did a pilot to look at hotspot locations that maybe we could have additional presence of Tampa PD. In December, we tried a pilot program that was based on feedback from the operators. One of the things in our conversations throughout these past couple months, the operators have said, we'd like to see either police or security on the buses. So we are working through that. We have done a pilot with our security guards and having them on some of the selected routes. Now, we obviously can't put a security guard on every single bus route. We have 133 that pull out every morning. But we want to make sure that we are listening to our employees and working diligently on finding practical solutions for the problems that they may face. Again, we have 13 million trips. The vast, 99% of those, we have no incident. But even that 1%, this organization takes very seriously. We are working at the state level to get enhanced protections for transit workers when they are assaulted. A week or two ago, a number of HART staff were up in Tallahassee advocating on how we protect our operators and how we give them additional safeguards. HART has been a lead in that statewide movement. We've also updated our trespass notifications. Again, working with our bus operators, one of the things they said is, we'd like you guys to do a better job of letting us know who is actually trespassed. So we updated the booklet to make sure that we had images of who's been trespassed, so that's more open in terms of communicating to our bus operators. At any given time, we do have roughly 100 people, over 100 people that are trespassed from our system with our partners in Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office and Tampa PD. Finally, we've also revised our fare collection policy to try to make it less confrontational in terms of when that interaction is taking place on the bus. So those are the things that we've done. I can tell you we've worked very hard this year. Those are hard deliverables that this organization has come together as a team to do. Moving forward, we're going to continue with quarterly safety trainings. One of the things is that we want to focus it on specifically on mode. So we have fixed route bus versus streetcar versus our paratransit, so we can specialize that training a little bit more. We're going to continue with our awareness programs. Management is going to be safe driving observations. We're going to have cross-department route review teams to look at what's occurring on these routes from both an accident on a safety side or an incident on a security side perspective. Continue with operator and staff coaching. We're looking at software implementation in terms of helping with our data analysis, and also looking at mental health education. So I go back to when we talked about the sheriff's office that came and did some of the training. They did a really great on situational awareness and de-escalation, but what we found is, as a social service provider that transit is, on the front line, our employees do come in contact with the mental health community. How do we give them the tools to interact with that community so they're in a position to succeed? And we really are going to have a focus. That's one of our next steps, is how do we work with someone like maybe Grace Point or Hillsborough County's Crisis Center, of giving our operators the tools when it comes to interacting with that community. So I'm proud of what our team has done. It's not been one person, but they really have come together to do deliverables to show this community and our employees that we do care, and we're not going to stop moving forward. Finally, I wanted to ensure this board that we're going to continue to report on a more stringent schedule in terms of hearing your guys' feedback to make sure that we're keeping this board up to date and abreast of all situations that are occurring. So we've broken down in the presentation here of, full board quarterly kind of updates, and then the committee having monthly updates on all information so that you guys have this data moving forward, and there is no question about us pushing it forward to all of you and making sure you're fully informed as members of this board. With that said, I thank you for your guys' support, and I'm happy to answer any questions I can.
Mr. Malloy, thank you very much for that report. You've done a lot of work in making sure that our drivers and our customers are safe. And I want to thank you and all of your staff and all those drivers that are involved and everyone that's involved. I mean, it's a daunting task. Ms. House, you also. You got thrust in the middle of this stuff, and you've done a yeoman's job, and I want to thank you for what you've done. So thank you very much. Mr. McLean, you recognize.
Yeah, I want to echo your comments, Commissioner Mill. Great job, and thank you for the report. Just a recommendation and then a question. On your pie charts, you give us great percentages, but you don't give us numbers. And I think by giving us numbers, it would allow us to put that in better perspective of what it is. And so the question I have is, in looking at 2019 accident types, 41% represents how many fixed objects or mirror?
I can get that information to you and send it to you. I can give you the exact number. I'm sorry, I don't have it readily
Yeah,
available.
and that's just making a point. I think
Yes,
if we
sir.
had the numbers on all your pie charts along with the percentages, it allows us to put it in better perspective. So thank you and great briefing.
Be happy to do,
Appreciate
sir.
it.
Yes.
Mr. Smith, you recognize.
Thank you. Thank you for this report. It's the second time I've seen it. I saw it on the Operations and Safety Committee. And I think we've done a great job. I, too, am very proud of the job that HART has done in the deliverables, getting those shields manufactured, custom-made, and installed so quickly after our tragedy was priority number one. Working, and the way that staff has worked together with the operators and the unions, with the manufacturers of those shields, has been a really good example of everyone working together and listening to each other. And the de-escalation training with the sheriff, we're very lucky to have Sheriff Chronister involved in that and leading those. So that's our whole community coming together in the wake of some of the tragedy and the very bad attacks we've had, the trespassing steps that you all are working, your department is working on. And so I'm pleased to hear that our next step is really diving deep into the data and information like we discussed at the committee and getting those monthly reports out, because that's going to be the key to better figuring out the patterns and the disturbing escalation that we've been seeing lately in the verbal assaults, and figuring out what the causes of that are, any patterns that would help us really address that. But I'm pleased that the priorities were set, and so we could do first things first, and then now really turn to getting into the data and information reports more closely.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes.
Commissioner Overman, you recognize.
Mr. Malloy, thank you very much for your report. You have done a great job of pulling together a lot of good information to help HART as an organization really celebrate how awesome our drivers are and make sure they're safe. I too wanted to echo Director McLean's comments. Having the numbers really work, 25% of 2 is difficult to show. 25% of 300 is a whole different issue. So giving us a little more data would be helpful. A couple of comments. One, I did sit in the safety meeting, and I also did go to Tallahassee and met with the co-sponsor of the legislation that's being proposed to protect our transit drivers. It looks good so far, but I'm glad we have that. I think it is going to be more important that we have great processes for being able to record and report incidences in a way. I'm not sure what that process looks like. Is it, pushing the panic button? Is it calling a dispatcher? Is it texting, someone that I've got a problem here? How our operators are able to not only report reliably so that data can be captured, but also in a quick manner so that they're able to be protected in the event that they are in fact at risk. I think is critically important. I too am really proud of the organization for getting the shields up as quickly as possible. I mean, it was a yeoman's job getting that done, and obviously everyone was on deck making that happen, and I know this board was very interested in getting it done rather quickly. But having a quick way of gathering the data will help us be best prepared for 2 reasons. One, we want to make sure that we really are able to dive into the data to find out what things we can do to mitigate or reduce behaviors that are inappropriate on our bus. 2, make sure that in the event the legislation passes and the consequences are greater, that we have enough data that prosecution is possible in the event that a crime has occurred. I think that's going to become much more important given the consequences are going to be greater. And then 3, I'd made mention of making sure that our signage is in multiple languages. Tampa and Hillsborough County represents the diversity of our country in a greater way than most people realize. So having those, the signage in multiple languages may facilitate actually making sure that we have our patrons, those that are not struggling with mental illness or other issues, have the information they need to know to understand the consequences of their actions. I think that may help in maybe reducing that 40% number in the future. So, but thank you very much for the work that you've done. I appreciate it.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ms. Williams, recognized.
Mr. Malloy, thank you so much for the presentation. You did a fine job, and I echo the sentiments of previous board members. And I do appreciate all of the work that's even forthcoming as well, and making that first a priority. So thank you so much. I do have a question about the shields. The shields were put on the buses, I believe, in fourth quarter, right?
We completed.
October through.
We began, so as soon as we received, so how the process worked is that this was a custom solution, so we got them in batches. So as soon as the vendor produced them, they shipped us, I think, roughly 30 to 40 at a time. We immediately put them in. So it was a constant process throughout the fall and the winter of as soon as we received a shield, we put them in. And we completed, I believe, in December, we completed all shields on the entire fixed route fleet. So we really kind of had it as it was kind of rolling stock as it came in. And as soon as we received them, we installed.
Okay, thank you. I looked at 2019. It talks about 41% of the accidents fixed objects, mirror contact, and then when I look at fourth quarter, it indicates 50%. So there was an increase in fourth quarter. And do you believe that there is any association with the physical altercations or verbal altercations? Is there a tie-in around the holidays, or is there something that a driver may be, threatened more? I just want to understand more the correlation. I know you can probably pull that together later, but I just saw the trend increase.
Yeah,
when we were doing even more work.
Yes, it's a great point that you bring up. It is the area that we're looking at right now. So we had a cross-department team of operations, safety, maintenance staff actually met last week on this increase. So we saw the data. We've been looking at what are some of the action items that go into play. So whether traditionally the increase on fixed object collisions are normally due to distraction from a bus operator. We have great bus operators, but there's a lot of distractions that occur on the road. So sometimes that moment or two you take your eyes off, you might hit kind of one of our bus stop signs and you slap one of the mirrors. So we're looking at that as well as the positioning of the bus as they're moving along some of these corridors, and even where some of the bus stops are placed along some of these corridors so that we can put our operators in a position to succeed. I haven't looked specifically in terms of the verbal altercation, and maybe that leads into additional distraction. I think that's a very good point that I'll go back with my team and we can come back and provide an answer for you. But I think that's an interesting topic that we probably do want to look at, and we'll talk with the operators, I think, firsthand to see, are they experiencing that? There's a question we probably need to ask them if maybe that's leading into that distraction that they have. So I'll definitely be happy to follow up with you on that, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Knight, you recognize.
Yeah, and again, Mr. Malloy, thanks for everything. But also like to see more, you're doing a good job, but as far as like the drivers, I think we should try to achieve more on a non-hostile working environment, and also zero policy on some of these things, such as spitting and different things like that, that I think even with the accident and different things, that the attitude of the drivers better, that they don't have to go through a lot of things that they're going through, because a lot of them come to me. I ask, they don't even know who I am. How everything going out on the bus? Different things are happening, and we're working good on it, but I'm saying to continue to push and keep those drivers involved in tailboarding and whatever happened, we want to stay proactive on it. And I think that a lot of these things would get better, addressed.
Yeah, thank you for your question, sir, and I completely agree. I know Ms. Carolyn House Stewart, Mr. Limmer, and the entire is committed to this. This is not we give you one presentation and then we're just moving on. This is it's a core item for our organization and working with our employees who are the frontline staff of, we're not going to let this issue drop. We're going to continue working it.
Commissioner Kemp, you recognized.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, as everyone else. It looks like we have very aggressively looked to do what we can, as was noted by the others. And I do, along with Director Knight, I feel good about your reassurances that we will continue to be noticed, that this will be a core mission of this organization to do this. I'm just looking at, I do want to see the reporting.
Yes, ma'am.
Clearly delineated with numbers and regular reports made to the board so that there can be follow-up and notice and that we can understand more of what's going on. I'm also wondering if there's any models for any kind of process. Director Knight hears from drivers. I just wonder for us to hear from drivers at some time, or staff, about this so we can be better informed on a regular basis. Some process for feedback in that way.
And one of the things that was brought up in the committee meeting that I do want to reference is that, I don't want to get too much in depth, but we're looking at enhancing our committee structure that we work with the operator. So there in the contract negotiations, we've talked mutually, both sides, the AT and the union, of how do we communicate better, how do we formalize it into a little bit more robust safety committee so that we can hit issues such as you talked about. So we've engaged them even in the contract negotiations of formalizing that, so we have more avenues for them to come in and speak on the issues that you and Director Knight brought up.
Thank you.
Mr. Malloy, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Excellent job. Thank you. We're now moving to approval of our action items. The first one is Resolution R 2020-02-03.
Mr. Chairman, in light of the partnership request, I move that this item be deleted.
There's a motion by Mr. Mechanic, second by Councilman Schuster, that we remove and delete item A, 7A. Is there any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. Motion is adopted. We now move into item B, Resolution R 2020-02-04. Who's handling that? Yes, sir.
Chris Cochran.
Mr. Cochran.
Morning, Board. Chris Cochran, Director of Service Development. I'll let you set that. Thank you, Nina. All right. Again, Chris Cochran, Director of Service Development. This first action item I have while I'm up here is to bring to you the consideration to authorize our interim Chief Executive Officer to execute a contract for a network reevaluation and short-term service plan. To start off, this was brought to the Strategic Planning Committee last week, and it was not a definitive decision on this, and we decided to bring it to the board for further review. So I'm going to give you the same presentation in an actual PowerPoint this time that I tried to verbalize. I think this presentation will hopefully clear up a lot of the questions that were brought up during that committee. So this is not a presentation that was shown to the strategic committee, but it is an overview of what was talked about. So again, the overview of this project is to develop a short-term bus operations plan that will feed into our major 30-year transit development plan solicited in the future, that being tied to our proposed surtax funding. This short-term would be a 2 to 3 year plan, And it will also be associated with a separate outreach contract that you'll hear about after this as well. One of the things that I wanted to make very clear that may not have been as clear in the previous discussion at the Planning Committee is the importance of a significant portion of this contract and being tied to an origin and destination survey, an onboard survey that FTA requires for our agency to do on it's good for 5 years, so every 6th year we have to complete this as part of our Title VI requirements. And we are in our 6th year, so as part of this project, it is necessary for us to get the best information in making recommendations out of this study, that we do this onboard survey as part of this project, but it will also serve to satisfy this FTA requirement. And I think another important piece here for everyone to understand is that the Envision streetcar study is currently waiting for this data information as well to be plugged into their modeling, the FTA modeling software that's called STOPS. This modeling software, the results of this modeling software is necessary for that application to move forward. And if you want some clarity on that, I do have Danny Jorgensen from the city of Tampa here that can discuss that a little more if you need any more clarity on that as well. So at this point in time, there are a number of very critical components tied to this origin destination survey, which makes up about a little over $120,000 of this budget, and it's a very, very important part of what we're doing. So give you a background on a pre-proposal preparation that went into this project. HART staff met with several firms prior to the proposal being issued. The goal of this preparation, as we often do with many of our proposals, consultants reach out to us. They want to know what's going on in the agency. It's really discussions are used to kind of develop our own expectations and help us create targeted outcomes that go into the evaluations of these RFPs, and ultimately provide a high-level overview of certain short and long-term needs to HART to these consultants. For this particular RFP, 107 companies were notified of this opportunity. 95 firms were notified via our electric bid system, and we actually sent it directly to 12 firms. We had 28 firms download this RFP, and we ultimately got 2 proposals that made up 9 different firms. So one bid had 4 firms in it, another bid had 5. So we had a pretty good adoption rate of 32% that responded to the 28 total that downloaded this project. And we often see that in our bid proposals, that we have a number of firms that will download this, and they get on the phone and they start talking to each other, who wants to team up with each other on this, and they all have their own specialties to make the best opportunity and give us the best opportunity to select who we need to get done what to serve the goals that we want out of this project. The RFP was issued on September 13th. The deadline was October 11th, and we did our project evaluations on December 13th, so staff had a fair amount of time to evaluate the return bids, and our evaluation team was very comprehensive. This is a very important project that covers the entire county. We had two members from HART staff. We had the City of Tampa, Hillsborough County MPO, City of Temple Terrace, and the City of Plant City, all represented, and we were very conscious about being inclusive of everybody that would be touched by this study. So our recommended proposal, Kinetics Transportation Group ultimately earned 950 out of 1,000 points, becoming the prime firm. Kinetics Transportation Group has been in business since 2005. They're a very well-qualified firm. They will be performing 54% of the project work, and they are a DBE firm. Our initial goal was 20% for this project, so we're looking at about 40% of for the DBE hours going to the DBE firm. And that's more than twice, a little bit over twice our goal we ended up with. The project management will be conducted by an AICP certified manager. And just to give you some example of what Kinetics Transportation Group has done, they performed work all over the country, from Orlando to Jacksonville. They have done work here in Tampa before, Miami, West Palm Beach, Atlanta, Houston, Dallas, Louisville, Tulsa, and other major metropolitan areas. So they have a number of projects that they've worked on throughout the country, and we felt very comfortable that they would do well here in Tampa as well. The subcontracting firms, Tyndall Oliver, will be providing about 7% of the total hours, just in support of this project. Service Edge Solutions will be doing some modeling. It's a local gentleman that works with DOT very closely and does all the modeling for a number of agencies in association with DOT. And also, ETC Institute, which will be doing the onboard survey, has just an immense amount of onboard origin destination survey experience. They were far and away the most qualified for that particular function. So in total, the subcontracting firms have more than 100 years of combined transit experience. So that, again, we felt comfortable that it demonstrated the experience necessary for this. So the budget for the network reevaluation and short-term service plan here is a total of $405,155. We initially have a $300,000 that we have available currently today through an FTA grant. It is 100% funded by the feds. And then the other $105,000 is contingent on the surtax funding. Now, that $300,000 in FTA funding will fund the initial onboard survey, which we would start out with and get going with right away. And then after that, we have a number of tasks that would be taken care of with the additional about $150,000 that is associated with market analyses, reevaluations of our current network, a lot of public outreach. And regardless of whether we get the surtax funding or not, this is critical information that the agency could use in combination with the origin and destination survey for years to come. It's great opportunity for us to take advantage of this funding, regardless of whether or not we get the surtax funding. And the final negotiated price as well, we did want to point out, was about 10% savings from what we expected. Our initial budget might be to be $450,000. So we were able to negotiate a significant amount of hours out of the contract with the proposed vendor, and we worked very hard on getting that number down. So ultimately, we're asking to authorize the interim chief executive officer to award this contract for the execution of a network evaluation and short-term service plan to Kinetics Transportation Group in a amount not to exceed $405,155. And I'd be happy to take some questions, and certainly hope this helps clear up some of what may not have been clear last week.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cochran. Mr. McLean, you recognize.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Mr. Cochran, thank you for a good briefing and a rundown of the procurement process. I appreciate it. Just for clarification, this didn't come forward with a recommendation because we didn't have a quorum at the end of the discussion to make a recommendation to the board. With that said, I'm motion to approve this as written.
There's a motion by Mr. McLean, second by Mr. Williams to approve this item. Commissioner Overman, you recognize.
Thank you, and thank you, Chris, for the report. That was much more thorough than we previously had thought, so it's very helpful to have all of that information. I had brought up at the meeting some concerns that I don't think have been added or addressed as of yet. One, if this gets us closer to having a route on Williams Road where affordable housing is, I'd be really excited. So that outcome will be, I'll ask one more time, can I get a bus at Williams Road near our affordable housing projects that are opening up this year? So if this is one of the processes that helps something like that occur, where there's a clear need to connect transit with affordable housing assets within our network, that's exciting, if that's where we go. The TOD study that we currently have in place really is addressing more of the between university and downtown, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So will this study actually expand beyond that area?
Yes, so just to be clear, this is the entire county. The idea of this is for us to take a look at what we did for Mission Max, with the idea that instead of shrinking our system, we now have more money. How are we going to set a baseline to expand it over the next 30 years with our funding? This sets the baseline for us to expand the service over the next 30 years. So this will be done, and then the expectation is that the major 30-year transportation development plan will be set into place. As far as addressing affordable housing, that is absolutely part of it. Do know staff has actually been out to the location that you talked about. We are working on hopefully getting that sooner than later. We're well aware of the size and impact of that potential site. So thank you for bringing it to our attention, and affordable housing will continuously be a part of how we evaluate our system moving forward. So.
As a follow-up, and that's what I appreciate. This is looking at ways that we can use transit-oriented development as a way, not only for transit, but also for how our county grows. So if using existing TOD area is part of the analysis, I'm curious how we go about making sure that if we don't have current TOD zoning in place, how it plays a part in this. Granted, it's a 2-year study, so a lot can happen in 2 years, but a lot cannot happen in 2 years. So
I think we want to make sure we keep the TOD and the COA, this network reevaluation, separate at this point in time. The TOD study will look at our existing policies that need to be evaluated and changed to promote better TOD opportunities. We are using the corridor between USF and downtown as that study area, with the idea that what comes out of that we will be able to replicate throughout the county and potentially throughout the region. And PSTA is doing one down in St. Pete as well. So hopefully we can coordinate with them after those are over and see how that can make sense in the region as a whole. So, but initially this is really focused on our bus network. This network reevaluation that we are talking about right now, this contract.
right, and the reason I ask is because there's the brownie points that we get, or the bonus points that we get when we consider transportation disadvantaged communities, of which the MPO has that data, will play a big part on how we move forward, not only over the next 2 years, but over the next 30. So I appreciate your answers. Thank you very much for the thoroughness.
Councilman Cicely, recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One comment and 2 questions. Mr. Cochran, very good presentation. I wish you had brought this last week. It would have saved us about 45 minutes worth of time. My 2 questions are, all right, I'm back on my number of studies that we have going on. Is this in any way, shape, or form being covered by any of the other studies that we have going on right now?
Only
And by
in,
that I mean, is the information that we're going to get from this already going to be available to us by any other study that we have going on?
not from the perspective that we're looking at it through the whole county. There are other studies going on Fowler Avenue, on Florida and Nebraska, but in the scope of the size of Hillsborough County being almost the size of the state of Rhode Island, this is not comparable, no.
Second question then is, okay, the FTA grant's going to cover 300,000. The other 105, where's it coming from if, let's say, the surcharge does not get approved?
So we will, we have looked at the way the contract will be structured is that we will, and we've already really identified $105,000 worth of services that will be optional in the contract with the prime, ensuring that what we do get from that grant is critical to us and ensuring we are able to use that for future planning purposes. So and that will primarily come out of, as part of the study recommendations, you can point to creating an operational plan and a financial plan that's associated with the operational plan. If we don't get the IOC surtax funding, we don't necessarily need that part, but it doesn't mean all of the public outreach that we've done, the origin destination survey, the reevaluation of our existing network as it stands today, post Mission Max, is not critical for us to add to our planning purposes moving down.
Okay, thank you. Final point. I know I've been somewhat tongue-in-cheek in my questioning regarding the number of surveys and analyses and reports, but seriously, I'd like to someday see a list. What do we have going on at any given point? You know, pick a date, and we have this study doing this study doing that. I just would be curious to see how pervasive and how widespread that is. Thank you.
I think that's a number we can get you.
And we've made that assignment to Chris already.
Mayor Castro, you recognize.
Thank you. The city is very, yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. The city is very supportive of seeing this contract move forward. As a major component of the project is the onboard rider surveys, and that information is necessary for our federal grant application to have the streetcar extension and modernization project. So delaying this could negatively affect our ability to receive that funding for the extension of the streetcar.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kemp, you recognize.
Thank you. Well, I certainly do appreciate having a presentation. I know I had asked prior questions before that meeting and really got very little information. I think it's instructive, the questions that have been asked by the board here today, because I think it reflects how little was actually understood or known about this. And I think it's really critical. This is one of the most important decisions that we are looking at as a board. Maybe maybe the most important moving forward in the future. And I think for us to have had so little information about it, very little, almost nothing in the backup, nothing to review, and no questions answered, I think was a real problem. I'm just, first of all, the first procurement here, because we have two lined up here related to this, right? Okay, so the first one is kinetics, and thank you for explaining, because I think few members were aware of the import of this. I'm not sure how they could be. To make recommendations to HART about how this board should invest transit tax dollars. The next procurement that's coming up is related to this, right? It selects the team Valerian that will help us do community engagement and involve the public in this process. Is that
Correct.
Okay, and so that contract is for 300,000?
Correct.
Okay. And where does that come out of? Just,
Same, the FTA grant was actually for a total of $600,000. We dedicated 300 to the network reevaluation and 300 to outreach.
and again, I think that the questions that the board has are reflective of how little was understood about this. These are not widgets that we're buying here today. Policy is hugely involved in this work. The decisions that will come out of this work are critical for all of us, and it's critical that we get this right, that we effectively involve the public and the board in this process in planning our transit future. I know that I had to ask for the scope to see what it was. Here's the work plan. It wasn't in the backup. I don't know if any other board members are familiar with this or know it. You would not have known it. I think as to Director Schizler's comment about how you don't know what studies are going on, well taken. I mean, to me, all of these should be something that we at least, before the RFP goes out, that it should be on our consent agenda as just a matter of notice for us to understand that this is where we're moving. This document here lays out the processes and assignments for how the consultant will make recommendations about expanding the bus service and how to spend the portion set aside for capital projects. These are huge policy decisions that we as a board or board members are going to be part of, but we don't really, I just feel like there's not been discussion about how we are engaged in this from the start. I mean, I think we should have been there to talk about what this process how it should go forward, so that could be part of how we move forward and take a role in this. This is not just a process to be driven, in my mind, by consultants and staff, but one that we need to be wholly engaged in with robust public engagement that I have no idea how that moves forward, because I don't feel like there's been discussion or real thought about how, I mean, we're just learning about this now. So not only do these involve large contracts, hundreds of thousands of dollars, we're hearing $700,000. The scope of work went out in September. They didn't require board approval under our current policies. And I think we need to change how we approve these large policy-related contracts moving forward. This is important that these things are not done without our involvement, knowledge, understanding, if we're going to do the oversight that we should do. And I would just think there should be a continuing list of the studies that are going on every month in our packet, so we can just follow it. But that we should first, that these solicitations, notice of these solicitations comes to us on consent, so we can at least follow what's going on. So I'm just gonna leave it at that and say that, you know, I hope that these processes we can change going forward.
I don't think we should be micromanaging anything that the staff has done. It comes before us at every opportunity. We should not be indulging in micromanaging what they're doing. We have a clear opportunity every time we come to this board, have a presentation from staff as to what we have. If you don't like what they're doing at that particular point in time, you can tell them you don't like it and vote against it. But to sit here and micromanage what they're doing in every aspect of every contract is absolutely wrong. We haven't done that in the past. We should not be doing it now. This is a board that sets policy, not indulge in the day-to-day operations of this agency. Those contracts come before us, just like this one has come before us. It was supposed to be discussed in committee. The committee didn't get an opportunity to vote on it because it lost a quorum, and decided to bring it back to this board. If this board does not like it, it can vote against it. If the board likes it, they vote for it and move it on. I think staff has done an excellent job in this whole process, and micromanaging is absolutely wrong. So if anybody want to delve any further on that, I can go in a little bit more detail. I don't think you want me to go into more detail than what I have on my desk right now. So let's move forward. Commissioner, Mr. Knight, you recognize.
Okay. Again, great presentation. Also, just like Commissioner said, Overman on Williams Road, any consideration, or will it be included like a Sly Avenue between 301 and 56th Street? Because it's really growing out there and with the housing and everything.
Commissioner Smith, you recognize.
Thank you, and thank you, Commissioner Kemp, because I was wondering if I got lost or had missed some information about how we were supposed to be engaged in the element of the county-wide transit-oriented development study is something that county commissioners, the mayor, people who are involved in land use and determining planning for our future are going to need to be deeply involved in those plans. Now, that has nothing to do with micromanaging this RFP coming before us. That's talking about the larger issue that I think Councilman Schisler was also referencing is ways for the elected officials who are involved in land use and transit-oriented development can be more informed and participate in that part of the expansion of this TOD from a small area to what you rightly noted is a countywide area as large as some states. And so I will be looking forward to being more closely involved in that as we move forward. As far as this RFP goes, I totally agree with Mayor Castor. We need that origin and destination study. We need that data for the streetcar. I understand, we need that, as you say, we need that origin and destination study every 6 years. How much did you say that part costs? 100,000?
Get an exact number, a little more, about closer to about 115,000.
So, I mean, that, no question, that part needs to be done. The concern I have is that this process that gave birth to this RFP, moving forward, it went forward in our plan that we sent to the IOC, this package of both sides, the study side and the 2-year planning side, as well as the outreach side. That went to the IOC for $750,000. We were lucky we got that down to $700,000, counting $100,000 we're hoping to get for the tax. But when that went out, end of last summer, beginning of fall, at that time, it seemed that the court challenge to this sales tax would be settled by now, and we were going to begin making plans for the future. And based on this tax, we all felt very optimistic about, and certainly the first step of that would be the 2 years and feeding into the 30 years. At this time, our budget is no different than it was 2018, and we have to be mindful of that, and a little bit more mindful that the 2-year plan that we make, feeding into this 30-year plan, is going to vary widely depending on whether or not our tax survives that court challenge. So I'm just wondering if whether it would be smart to just do the origin and destination study and begin collecting that data and talking about, moving a little bit more carefully until we're sure what we're planning for before we start making plans. Or are you satisfied that this plan is going to come back somehow with options that would apply whether or not we find out we're going to find out we're rich or poor sometime by the end of this year. And that's going to make a big difference in how this plan should come back to us.
Right, so I think it's careful, it's not careful, excuse me, it's important to understand that this study would likely in whole take somewhere between 9 and 12 months at this point. We would be able to begin doing this origin destination survey right out of the gate, which would take, you know, Justin, do you have any estimation of how long the survey might take?
4 months.
Yeah, so hopefully, you know, our thought is perhaps by 4 months, before we move forward after the survey, we might know even by then where we're at. If we're not, you know, there's still a great deal of public outreach that's involved in this contract that we have an opportunity to go out and get, you know, regardless of whether we have money or not, people want to be able to tell us what it is, what their needs are today. And that's very important as well. Market analyses of a great deal of development is happening very quickly throughout the county, so a market analysis would be very beneficial to HART as well. So I think we've been mindful in developing how we would spend this money, that anything we do spend out of the grant would be beneficial to us regardless of whether we get the surtax funding or not, and we could really hold that surtax funding, put that on hold to use on the operational and financial plan of which would really be the final recommendations of what would come out of their analyses. So,
Ms. Williams, you recognize.
you wanna?
If I could just add, Justin Willett, Service Planning. The results of this operational analysis are both going to be informative to whether we are poor or rich. If we are poor, we're going to have to make a lot of changes to our existing service to make sure that we can be on a successful trajectory. And getting the information from this operational analysis will do both of those things. And the most important thing to also keep in mind is that as the results of Mission Max were popular to varying degrees amongst our board members, this was under the direction of revisiting Mission Max. So we can revisit Mission Max whether or not we're poor or rich, and we can make informed decisions based on the data we're going to get from this study.
Okay.
Thanks.
Ms. Williams, you're the last speaker, and then we're going to vote.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make the point that we had a committee meeting, we had lots of discussion, and this information has been very helpful, and we appreciate the fact that you brought that back today. In addition to the recognition of Councilmember Schussler's request, I understand we do need a list, and we want to keep a working list of all of the studies that are taking place. I think that's an excellent idea, but we do have a committee to discuss the level of detail we're discussing today. And so whether we agree or not agree, I believe we need to have more robust conversations in the committee meetings and ask those type of questions. And if there is, a committee is a governing body that is supposed to ask questions, get information and so forth, but we entrust the staff. That's why we brought the staff on board, to make sure they specialize in the work that they do and are subject matter experts. So I understand there's certain components that we have questions about, and if this requires more discussion, I say we take up some of these recommendations in the committee meeting, but also we delve into that and bring the decision forward to the board so we can move forward.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. McLean, second by Mr. Williams, to approve Resolution R 2020-02-04. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Opposed likewise. Motion is adopted. Motion adopted. Yes, Commissioner.
I had a comment.
Well, the motion's been taken.
Just in regards to that discussion, I just wanted to address, I just think it's important to address what's going as micromanaging, because I think we're really at the other end of that spectrum in terms of a board having appropriate involvement and direction as setting policy. And I think that there's that we need to look for balance in that I don't think we've achieved. And so that's what I'm addressing. And I hope that we can start to move towards that in the future, not just by committees, but also by the work of this board.
Mr. Cochran, number 3, Resolution R 2020-02-05.
All right. Thank you. So this informational item, the planning committee meeting last Friday was actually unable to get to this item, so we have brought it to the board for directly for consideration. We are asking for approval for the interim CEO, Chief Executive Officer, to approve a contract with the Valerian Group in an amount not to exceed $300,000. Valerian Group was selected, one of 2 vendors that was selected out of this RFP process. Just some real quick information on Valerian Group that may find beneficial in this. Valerian Group is a Tampa-based DBE certified business. They've been in business for 14 years at this point. They have more than 375 years of combined experience on their staff, and they provided services on more than 600 projects, and that alone, I think, speaks a lot for itself. They provided services on a number of high-profile projects with agencies throughout Florida, including our own city of Tampa, FDOT, T-BARDA, Hillsborough County, and a number of other projects, many of them involving exactly this type of public outreach. So we felt very comfortable with selecting Valerian Group. The budget for this public outreach contract is a total not to exceed the $300,000, which will be covered 100% by FTA funding. We have created some flexibility in the contract for us to be able to, what they have proposed in their total amount of services, we have created some flexibility for us to be able to take on some of the work ourselves to help limit the costs and not being able to exceed that $300,000 amount. But this $300,000 will be done directly in conjunction with the COA or with the network evaluation. So the work that they are doing for this amount of money is directly tied to the last contract that you approved. And then with the hope that we are able to secure surtax funding in the future, we would look to have the opportunity to extend their services beyond that contract, potentially to work on the 30-year plan as well, so that we have some consistency and outreach services across the projects that we felt would be critical. So,
thank you, sir.
Do we have any questions?
Mr. McLean, you recognized.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Seeing that this is directly tied to item B, which we just approved, and also it's FTA funded, I motion to approve, sir.
Second.
A motion by Mr. McLean, second by Councilman Schisler. Any further discussion on the motion? Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Opposed likewise. Motion is adopted.
Aye.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much.
Motion is adopted. Interim Chief Secretary to the Board.
Good morning, board members. You requested that my report that traditionally has been done orally be reduced to writing so that you can have the text and the notes from that. So you will find my report on page 87 going forward. So this report is aligned with our key areas of focus: customer experience, community value, employee success, and financial performance. The first item to report on is our Flamingo beta testing training that occurred here at HART on January the 21st with our sister agencies and representatives from Hernando, Pasco, Pinellas, Sarasota, and Hillsborough County. Chris Tucker with Clever Consulting, the contract that you recently approved, was here. Beta testing launch is scheduled to begin on February the 5th. We need 1,000 participants for all riders with the cards that we now have that are real dollars, real money that the patrons will be using. The update to my report is that the Sarasota's interim Chief Executive Officer, Ms. Jane Grogg, informed us that they will not participate in the beta testing at this time. The agency is evaluating its service options and awaiting a report from their consultant, and their board meeting will meet later this month. But she assured us in the letter that we received that they are not withdrawing from the project. They just can't meet the timeline that starts the beta testing on Friday. We talked with our testing team, and instead of the original plan of 400 from Hillsborough, 400 from Pinellas, and 200 from Sarasota, we can still move forward with them not being a part of the beta testing. And the letter stated that if they need to get back on board at cost to participate in beta testing, they were willing to explore paying for that. The next item is the MTC construction project. That's the Marion Street Transfer Station project. The rehab project began on November the 4th, 2019, is scheduled to be completed May 2020. We have completed 98% of the Morgan Street that you see on the screen, and we're about to begin Phase 2, which is the demolition of the existing concrete and asphalt along Fortune Street as Phase 2. Under community value, HART will be hosting a small business education forum on Saturday, February the 8th at the 21st Street facility from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. It will be 2 sessions so that the disadvantaged minority business population and others will receive the opportunity for real-time registration and information on upcoming HART projects. State Representative Diane Hart will be a collaborative partner for this as a sponsor. Our update on the activities for Martin Luther King Day celebrations included the Toba Breakfast and the Martin Luther King Day Parade, and we thank those staff members who contributed to those efforts. Advancing our community value is a strategic area of our focus, and so for Black History Month, HART will again have its educational tour with our school systems. This year, the theme is Connecting Our Schools. Could you catch up with me on the slides, please? Connecting Our Schools while driving education. We will be visiting 9 schools with our specially wrapped bus that features some of the African Americans in Hillsborough County that have schools named after them, and we'll focus on the STEM schools, the magnet schools, and the leadership academies as we emphasize careers in transportation. We begin tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock at George W. Middleton High School. Next slide, please. The Gasparilla Parade, HART team had a playbook to increase ridership on the streetcars. We had coverage and increased our 10-minute frequency, and this was also supported by buses and van shuttles, so we thank the team of volunteers who helped us get through another Gasparilla season. The next item is the American Heart Association's Go Red campaign on February 7th. HART will participate in this awareness of cardiovascular disease, a leading cause of death among women. HART has a population that is 36% of women in our workforce, and so we'll be encouraging our employees to wear red in support of this effort. In keeping with employee success, we had our wellness fair on March 17th, 2020 at the HART facility on 21st Street. It also included flu shots, other immunizations, courtesy blood pressure screening checks. Many employees participated, and you can see that bicycle is a smoothie bike. You put your ingredients for your smoothie in the bike, and then you ride to mix your orange juice, your almond milk, your berries, your bananas, and your spinach to create a smoothie of your choice. And so our employees had fun doing that, and no one fell out in the process. Our Tallahassee press conference, Colin spoke about our Tallahassee press conference with Senator Keith Perry and Representative Michael Beltrain, who have already moved these bills, and they've been filed in both the House and the Senate. We also had participation from the Florida Sheriff's Association, the Florida Public Transportation Association. Their executive director was there, our HART employees. And as you know, this legislation proposes 4 changes. One is to require the installation of protected barriers on public transit. HART already has this. to request the posting of the maximum penalty for assaulting a transit worker. HART already has this. To require mandatory training for drivers to defuse and de-escalate potentially violent situations. HART has already implemented this. And so the push that we need is we agreed to work with the union on the effort to increase the assault against a uniformed public servant, transit workers, law enforcement officers, and other first responders from the current first-degree misdemeanor to a third-degree felony. And so we're leading the way in this effort. HART will participate in the annual rodeo in Manatee County at no cost to the agency. We just want to let you know that we're doing this. The event will be held Saturday, March 8th, 2020, followed by the state rodeo in April in Orlando. One of our metrics that we completed during this fiscal quarter was the completion of the renovations to the Northwest Transfer Station break room. We had the open house for that on Thursday, January 16th, 2020, out in Town and Country, right off of Sheldon Road, across the street from the Y. And many of our drivers came, but we also had a member of the public come to compliment HART and its drivers and to thank HART for providing this break room renovation for our drivers. HART has continued to work with Feed Tampa Bay, and on January 10th, we had a project where volunteers went to the Trinity Cafe to feed those citizens who are without stable housing. Update on the Sunrail tour, following the request of our board members. The Florida Department of Transportation, Sunrail, and Links identified Thursday, March 5th, 2020, for a HART MPO road trip to the Sunrail facility. The schedule is in the packet, and we need you to please let Danielle Arthur or Lena Pettit know if you plan to attend so we can have an accurate head count. Danielle, what was the last number? Was it 6 or 8?
It was 6.
We had 6 people sign up at the last head count for this, so we really need you to let us know if you want to go on this trip. On January the 17th, the FTA announced the availability of $130 million fiscal year 2020 funds to purchase or lease low or no emission vehicles, as well as related equipment and facilities. HART will be evaluating whether or not we will apply for this project, these funds again this year. The next item, of course, you received the communication from Secretary Elaine Chao announcing the $5.4 million grant for FTA's Human Trafficking and Awareness and Public Safety Initiative. HART was one of those 24 organizations that received $100,240 for our human trafficking awareness, which will not be only for our operators, but for the entire organization, such as when you go in CVS, if you see a person purchasing a large or excessive number of those personal items that you usually get 2 or 3 of for your travels, that's how one ring was stopped recently in the state of Florida by a citizen being aware that that was a human trafficking going on someplace. So that's part of the awareness that we will be doing across the agency, not just with our operators, for people using public transportation. And the update on the ATU negotiations, we're in the final phase now. We're informed that the International has recommended ratification, and the local union will vote on February 8th on the proposed contract. The team from Carlton Fields was here this morning, and so we have completed the assignment that you gave us for that, and that completes my report at this time.
Any questions? Commissioner Woman, you recognize.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask, as I was going to bring up the low and no emissions grant. Apparently, we've applied for that in the past and not gotten the grant, or given that the deadline is March 17th, I wanted to make sure that we pursued that with great vigor.
Yeah, we will be evaluating the projects, and again, do plan to apply. We do not have a grant. A person within the agency that is a grant writer specifically, so it will be teams from planning and finance, as in the past, have come together to put together a grant application.
Okay, so my question, thank you very much for that report, I appreciate it. And My question is, if we've applied in the past, what were our success points versus not? How did that process go? Because I think it's, given our mission and the potential for growing our network, this is a great opportunity. Congresswoman Castor made sure that I found out about the grant in a letter to her, so I want to make sure that I can report back to her how we're moving forward on this.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning. Cindy Stiglich, interim CFO for HART. So in FY 18, we did apply for 5 electric buses, and last year we applied for 8. We did have a debrief with FTA to find out why we were not selected for the project. Our project was given great consideration, and we were one of the top finalists. What we determined, although they couldn't tell us specifically what that match should have been, what we were told is that we probably needed to bring more local match to the equation. I believe we put forth a 30 or 35% match in last year's application, so it was suggested that we go as high as 50% with local funding.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Kemp, you recognized.
Thank you. With regards to that application too, because I know during 18, I think, or one of these, all the other, like virtually every agency in the state of Florida applied for electric buses, and we applied for CNG. And we were denied, and they all received the electric buses, so that almost everyone, and I don't know about their matching requirements, but if this grant, you could do CNG or electric, is that it?
So we applied for both last year. We applied for the bus and bus facilities for the CNG buses that we were just awarded the $4.3 million for. With the low-no, we applied for 8 electric buses.
Right, so the low-no on this one will definitely be applying for electric buses?
That is what we're inclined to do at this point. We're going to be meeting actually after this meeting this morning to determine what our best approach will be. It's suggested that we maybe scale back what we request, but we're still inclined to apply for electric buses.
Because I think there was a sentiment, it might have even been unanimous on this board at one time, that we should move forward as expeditiously as possible with looking at electric buses, and a commitment made if we were to receive the money to get 10 electric buses in March, actually. So I just think it's important to make sure that if an application is made, it's made for electric.
Right, and as I said, I believe that's where we are inclined to go this year, maybe with a different approach, and certainly with potentially more match.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before I move on to my report, let me say this. This board asked Ms. Stewart to serve as interim CEO, I think it's in November, if I'm not mistaken. And let me tell you that, and I know some of you probably know this, she has done an excellent job. I get phone calls all times, day and night from Ms. Stewart. There's not an issue that goes by that she does not call me to brief me on, and I think she does the same thing with you all. And she's doing this while she's still doing another job also, am I correct?
Yes, sir.
And you're doing the legal work also?
Yes.
That you've been doing before?
Yes.
So she's wearing 2 hats and doing 2 jobs at the same time. So as we thank and recognize all of our employees today and Mr. Malloy for his presentation, I want to thank Ms. House Stewart for what she's been doing as an interim CEO. You're doing an outstanding job. You still can call me anytime, day or night, if you need to call me. You do that for sure. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Ditto.
We're going to move into the chair's report. I have one item.
Agree.
One?
She said agree.
Agree.
Mayor Castor agreed.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mayor Castor. I heard something there. Our March 2nd regular board meeting, the Florida Strawberry Festival is an 11-day community event that starts in March. And of course, it's in Eastern Hillsborough County. The members of the Hillsborough County Board of County Commissioners always participates in that parade, which creates a conflict for us at our March meeting every year. So what we've done in the past is the board has directed staff to set up our meeting starting usually at 8 or 8:30. I think it's 8:30 most of the times, so that we can have a abbreviated agenda, and the members of the board that are the county commissioners can then go out to Plant City to participate in the parade. So if there's no objection to that, I would ask the staff prepare for us to have an 8:30 meeting starting on March 2nd with abbreviated agenda so that those that want to participate in the Plant City Parade can leave and go participate in it. Any objections to that?
No.
Okay, so I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I just said, I forgot something.
Oh, our March meeting will start at 8:30, and staff will get you all that information out. Ms. House, do it.
It's on page 90 is in the board packet is a response to the citizen's complaint from Mr. Paul Milken, who came with 3 comments and issues. And so the response is there, the delay in the departure of the bus occurred because our operator had a personal emergency and had to leave. I think it was about a 5 to 7 minute delay. The other involved the incident where either someone had removed the bus covering that provided customer information or an instance about a detour, and we determined based on our response and investigation that basically there was a detour that occurred and we were not informed prior to, and that's why the bus made the detour, and someone may have removed a sign from the bus stop. And the other, we're still investigating. He had a complaint that the one bus away application did not work, and so our technology team is addressing that with him.
Okay. In your packets on the item tab 10, you have the reports from the HART Board representatives for all those entities that's under there. We also have the status reports under tab 11. Any questions on those? Okay. We're going to move now into public input regarding non-agenda.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Before that, could I give the general counsel report? Or do you
Yes.
want me to do it
I'm
after?
sorry.
It's not on there, but I've got something
Okay.
I didn't
Yeah,
mention.
sure.
There's 2 things. First, having gone from a mushroom, I can tell you I hear frequently from our CEO, all the time, which is good. I now know a lot more of what's going on in the organization than I ever did. But having been not involved in procurement, now I've become immersed in it because of the recent events. And one of the things I've been advised that if we want to retain Labor and Employment Council to advise this board on issues that may come up by virtue of the investigative report, it needs to be approved by this board. So what I'm requesting is that this board authorize HART to retain one of the 2 Labor and Employment Councils who've been approved already pursuant to an RFP at an amount not to exceed $30,000. We may or may not need them, but if we do, this board needs to approve it because it's a step beyond what the RFP apparently approved.
So moved.
That's a motion by Commissioner Overman, second by
Second.
Mr. Chisler, Councilman Chisler. Commissioner Kemp?
That doesn't look like maybe there will be a problem, but I think it's critically important that we do that. I've discussed it before and thought that we should take that action.
Thank you.
Okay, all those in favor, let them know by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, likewise, motion is adopted.
And lastly, I'd like to give you a brief update on the transportation surtax. As you know, we have the oral argument in front of the Florida Supreme Court on Wednesday, starting at 9 o'clock. I think we're second on the agenda, so we'll probably go sometime around 9:45. We had a pre-meeting in Fort Lauderdale on Friday. We did a mock oral argument. Essentially, what we're doing is George Lemieux, some of you may know him, is going to be the lead advocate, and he is going to speak on behalf of the county, the city, and HART. He is an excellent lawyer. He's served in the Senate at one point briefly. He has been on the Judicial Nominating Committee. He's familiar with many of the justices, which doesn't hurt. And he certainly is a very good advocate. And the process we went through, the Florida Supreme Court had recently come out with their Amendment 4 opinion, in which they focused solely on the text of Amendment 4. This was the issue about felon voting rights. A couple of things about that. We went through our text much more critically on 212-0551. We have, I think, a newer and even stronger text argument. So I think we have a very good argument from the legal standpoint. Raul Cantero will also speak. So we have 2 speakers at the oral argument. It was decided you have 4 or 5 attorneys. The court doesn't like that. So we focused on 2. Raul Cantero was a Chief Justice of the Florida Supreme Court, is an excellent advocate. He's being paid for by AFT. So he will be there. I think we've really sharpened our case. The recent Supreme Court case I told you about was an opinion request from the governor. And it was requested in August. And it was delivered on January 16th. I tell you that because that's a 5-month time period during which they had somewhat of a full court and then not a full court. So that gives you perhaps an idea of what the time frame is with a decision that we could get. That has implications, but I just want to make sure you understand. It could be shorter than that, but I doubt it. This was a specific request from the governor that took them 5 months, and they decided based on the clear language. So that was apparently an easy decision for that court. Additionally, I think it's important to understand that I think we have an excellent oral argument. I think we're in good shape. We're ready to deliver that. We have a political headwind, if you will. You've got the House that has filed an amicus brief in opposition. You've got the Senate that's filed an amicus brief in opposition, and you've got our opponents. I would hope that this court would review the law as it reads, which is what they indicate is their approach to judicial matters, and that would be excellent. So, but we also have the governor who just said the other day at the Federalist Society meeting that the courts have too much power. They need to defer more to the elected bodies. Hopefully the justices will deal with the issue before them. So anyway, oral argument is Wednesday, and we'll know pretty quickly if the presenters, who are the appellants, don't get very many questions right off the bat. We've got an uphill swim. But as soon as we have some idea, we'll let you know. The opinion might not be rendered until much later, but we'll have some impressions at least that we can share with you. Lastly, I'd let you know there's been money collected. People have asked questions, what happens to the money? I think we ought to wait till after the oral argument to discuss that, but it is a significant amount of money, and it's an issue that requires careful analysis.
Okay.
So that's the end of my report.
Any questions? Thank you, sir. Now moving to public input regarding general concerns. Each person will have 3 minutes. Mr. Charles Loeb. 3 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Charles Loeb. I live in Tampa near Temple Terrace. I did want to make some general comments here to you. First of all, I was reading on the MPO calendar about the rail, about the thought, which was actually more of a T-bar thing. But as I got more into thinking about it, this is also a HART thing too. I was told that particularly Commissioner Kemp wants some information from Tri-Rail, which I have, and I'll be happy to share with her. And I'd rather her have the time. But I also was thinking about if this is in your plans, you should be thinking about the type of rail you want too. For example, do you want rail for just downtown or downtown to the, over to the airport? Do you want rail on the ground? Do you want rail above the ground, et cetera, and things like this? One thing for sure that is going to occur is whether you have money or not, you're not going to get anything if you don't know exactly what you want. This is a promise. The other thing I was also thinking about, it has to do with HART too, would have to be like, obviously you were talking here about customer output and things like that, but the idea is sort of an organization in it. In other words, for example, do you want, you put focuses on particular things, like rush hour service, weekend and night service, new routes, perhaps maybe throwing in the idea of a few buses for 24-hour services, and miscellaneous topics. Now, miscellaneous topics, for example, would include like, for example, the passes for the kids over the summer, because I did want to mention that to you. I appreciate you all doing that last year. I suggested that around this time last year, and I did want to bring that up again. And also, like, trying to get more, well, you like to see you all are talking about outreach, but the idea of let's say, getting to get to know people, in other words, have a greater outreach program than what I've seen in recent times. So that, and not only would it help, get your input, but also get the customers to help to know the drivers and the people that work as human beings, as opposed to just bus drivers, if you understand the point I'm making, as we saw an example of this today. I did also would like to suggest to you, and I suggested to your security person, that when you go do business with FDOT, or your representative that does business with FDOT, that you take the 5 bus up there and do it sort of incognito. So you could not only do your business up at FDOT and use transit as a good example to it of what you're doing, but also you can go incognito, look, see what's going on in the buses, see what the drivers have to deal with, and so on and so forth. And that way you have 2 birds, 1 stone, dealt with. I did leave you like a chart, kind of like a sample
sir.
chart. Yeah, very, yeah.
3 minutes are up.
Oh, well, anyway, I did leave you a sample chart and some writing.
Thank you. Ed Terenchek.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the HART Board of Directors. My name is Ed Terenchek. I'm appearing here today, Ackerman, on behalf of our clients, HMS Ferries and Southwell Development Group, to officially ask for the opportunity to present the Tampa Bay Permanent Ferry Service Project, Partnership Project, to appropriate HART committees and the HART Board of Directors. This project has been in development since 2014. It was procured by Hillsborough County. It's a public-private partnership project that has an advanced business plan that's been subject to design and engineering, environmental assessments, ridership studies, and whatnot. The county spent $1.4 million of its funds to develop this project. This project has an unprecedented private sector commitment to operate permanent ferry service between South County and MacDill Air Force Base, and between downtown and South County and St. Petersburg on evenings and weekends. That's a commitment of over $100 million in operating costs. It is unprecedented transit in the United States. It's also have a commitment from Mosaic to provide free land for a ferry terminal in South County. And it's the only premium transit option available in this county for overcrowded and rapidly growing South County. The Board of County Commissioners has supported the project and said, we'd like HART to take the lead on this. At least 5 county commissioners have expressed their support for this, but some felt that HART is the appropriate lead agency. On August 8th, they voted to send this project here, excuse me, August 7th. On August 8th, we transmitted 1,400 pages of documents to the agency. For a lot of circumstances, we are where we are today. However, right now, we have an incredibly successful intercity ferry service operating where most weekend trips are sold out. People are clamoring for permanent service, and they love this option. Moving this forward has been kind of like boxing with Jell-O. We're here to talk to the board because the county commission said, including the chairman, that this should come before HART. We're here formally asking for an opportunity to present a project that is incredibly successful, that has a $100 million private sector operating commitment to this transit agency. Not asking for any other thing other than an opportunity for you to hear and listen about it. But let me tell you, there are literally 75,000 people that want to see this done. And I think you'll hear from them as we move forward. So we'd like to get through the Jell-O, and we talked to the executive director. I think we're slated in February, but we know things change. So we would like this board to say, we'd like to hear that. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We're now moving to old business. Any old business?
I have some old business.
Commissioner Kemp, you recognized.
The conversation earlier today about committees got my attention earlier in the week when we were reviewing who had signed up for what committees and what had happened with the reorganization of the committees. There is the Legislative Policy Committee was one committee, and the TOD committee was a different committee. And I noticed in the description that that the TOD sort of got rolled into the Strategic Planning Committee, and yet the members didn't universally, and the mission didn't in the language. I think it's critically important that we make sure that's a priority. Given the disparity of and the complexity of the issue when it comes to legislative priorities, our policies, and our transit-oriented development, I think that it is going to be important that we consider how that committee has been reorganized and whether or not it needs to be restated to include more in the area of transit-oriented development. Because I know Mr. Hardin was on that. I believe, Mr. Mechanic, were you on that committee? And somehow you're no longer involved. And I thought, how do we get here? So if staff could come back and help us understand how those changes were made, when we approved them, and how we are addressing the fact that we had two committees rolled into one, and the description no longer includes those that were on the old committee, other than me. I'd just like to get a better
Good
understanding.
morning. Yes,
of how we got-
TOD committee was an ad hoc committee. Ad hoc committees have a short period of time. And yes, now it is a component of TOD is a part of the strategic planning committee. If there is something missing from the mission, we could discuss it at the next strategic planning committee and include it and beef it up. Also, the chair will be appointing immediately after this meeting new members to strategic committee as well as finance committee and operations and safety committee, and we will revisit also membership.
Okay, because when we filled out the survey, if someone were still interested in TOD, that wasn't a choice. So I'm just, it became a little more, I was like, if you're interested in the ad hoc, the issues that the ad hoc was addressing, that suddenly wasn't an option to continue to indicate that interest. And that was my question, is how do we go about making sure that we've had representatives on that committee that have actually had good conversation. So I want to make sure that continues within the strategic planning and external affairs
On page
committee.
7, well, it's 37 of the packet, description or roles, responsibilities of strategic planning and external relations committee. H, it does have a provision that TOD, transit-oriented development strategies, will be reviewed by this committee. It will be one of these responsibilities, but we could absolutely beef it up and add more.
It's there. I just wanted to make sure the members that previously were on that committee had an opportunity to indicate their continued
Absolutely. I will share
interest.
this information and our previous membership with the chair also so that we could make a decision.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll take care of it. Any other old business? Commissioner Smith, to recognize.
To Commissioner Overman's point, I was looking at that myself because I'm deeply interested in transit-oriented development and being involved in that. I'm on the Tampa Bay Water Board, which meets at the very same Monday time slot as the strategic planning. So either I find a way to participate in a transportation-oriented development committee, or I will end up micromanaging it from the board level. I'm not sure, but I do want to be involved in those issues.
Okay. Any other old business? Any new business?
I do.
Commissioner, Ms. Williams, recognize.
In the spirit of recognition, I just wanted to acknowledge Director Harden for making the motion to extend Chairman Miller's term. It is absolutely the right thing to do and will maintain continuity in the current investigation. And as a result of that, I want to officially say thank you on the record.
Well, thank you, Mr. Harden, and thank you, Ms. Williams. I appreciate that. I'm just here to do what I can to make this agency be the best it possibly can be, and to continue to serve as your chairman. As I thank you for it very much. And we can move forward and do the right thing in this body to make this agency the best it can be. Hopefully, the Supreme Court in its infinite wisdom will do the right thing, and we'll get what we need to make sure that the citizens of this county can get exactly what they want. So if I have to serve here a little longer as chair, I'll be more than willing to do that. Thank you. I'll get more gray hairs, that's okay. And Ms. House Stewart will be calling me every day. It's okay, I'm just messing with you. Okay, any new business? Any new business? Commissioner, I'm sorry, Commissioner Smith, you recognize.
Well, thank you, Mr. Tranchik, for coming to us with about the ferry. And 6 years ago, I was representing South County at a public meeting at the what was then the Ice Palace, introducing the ferry. And I've been hearing from South County citizens ever since. The commute, the traffic in South County is getting worse. This is an opportunity to consider a premium transit option that would serve South County and connect regionally, South County with downtown Tampa and St. Pete. So I'm very much wanting to move forward with, from the place that the County Commission has handed over this project to this agency, and hear from the HMS Ferry and hear a full-blown presentation about it on an upcoming meeting. Do we need a motion for that?
The process, and I'll let Ms. House Stewart talk about this, is that, go ahead. You talk.
Okay, the process is that the presentation will be first made to the Strategic Planning Committee and then move to the board. But understand, Commissioner, that HART, in any project that we decide to engage in, staff also has to have input and review and vetting and have a recommendation as to what staff will do. You just can't walk into HART and say, take this private partnership and run with it. And part of the jello has been, Mr. Tarantic has sent some updated information to staff, and he and I did have some conversations, as well as conversations with other members of this board. And the plan is that he will make his presentation at the February Strategic Planning Committee. But know that HART is also evaluating what has been sent to its staff as we use our expertise and consider our risk, as well as our finances that HART and capital investments that HART would have to make. Just because someone gives you land, someone has to build terminals and all those other things to go along with it. And there are things that the agency must do in complying with FTA and others if we're going to take on this project. So understand that HART is also doing its own vetting. And that HART will eventually come and make a presentation.
Of course, I
Okay, folks, hold
understand
on, hold on. Now we're getting into dealing with the ferry. Mr. Taranchek said what he had to say. Ms. House Stewart said will be before the Strategic Planning Committee this month. We're not going to get in a full debate today about the ferry. This is not the place and time to do that. This is only new business. So comments are made. Ms. House Stewart has said what she had to say. Is there anything else you want to say, Ms. Smith?
Just want to make sure we get the ball rolling through
Ball will be
all
rolling. It's going before
those
committee.
steps. Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Mechanic, you recognize.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to make the point. I mean, we're nowhere near voting to accept or not accept that
Right.
project. I think all Commissioner Smith was asking is that we hear about the project, and I also agree
Well,
with that.
she said, you hear about the project. It goes for a committee first, and then it will come before this board if the committee decides to bring it before the board. So legislative process, okay? Any new business? Any other new business? Seeing none, we're adjourned.